Greetings internet, it's Monica, and today I am so excited because I am going to be sharing with you all the books that I have recently read these past few months. I'm also going to be talking about my Q1 and Q2 reading goals. So at the beginning of the year, I shared that instead of doing just like large overarching goals for the entire year, I wanted to try and break them up into quarterly goals so that I could try and better achieve my reading goals instead of setting goals at the beginning of January and then not thinking about them until December. So yeah, I started doing that last quarter, so I'm going to update you on how that's been going and also letting you know the goals that I am setting for this next quarter. Before I dive in though, I do want to give a big thank you to this video sponsor, which is Book of the Month, which is a fast-growing online book service for readers. Their mission is to promote new and emerging authors and help readers discover books they love. Here's how it works. Their team vets hundreds of books each month and gives readers their choice from a curated selection of new and early release titles. Plus, they have a fantastic skip policy where you can skip any month, anytime, and you won't be charged. One of the books I'm most excited for this month is Arsenic and Adobo by Mia P. Manansala. This is a cozy mystery steeped in Filipino culture, and it sounds like such a fun read. We follow Lila, who feels like her life has taken on all the rom-com tropes. She moved back home, is trying to save her Tita Rosie's restaurant, and she has a host of matchmaking aunties who won't leave her be. But everything takes a turn when a notorious food critic drops dead after a confrontation with Lila, who then becomes the main suspect in their murder. But yeah, I'm really excited because I've never read a cozy mystery before, but it's a genre that I've really been wanting to explore, so I'm excited for this to be my first foray into that world. And I love Book of the Month because they have the best price for new release hardcover fiction, and you can get your first book for just $9.99 with the code SPRINGFUN. If you want to learn more about Book of the Month and check out all of the picks for this month, there's a link in my description box below where you can do that. But yeah, thank you so much Book of the Month for sponsoring this video. So now moving on to the books that I read over the past few months. The first one was a bit of a surprise for me. The first book that I read is These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong. This was one of my most anticipated books of the entire year, and unfortunately it just wasn't a hit for me. This is a 1920s historical fiction novel set in Shanghai. It's also a Romeo and Juliet retelling, and it also has like paranormal elements. And all of those things sounded amazing to me, and I loved a lot about this book. Like, I loved all the ideas in it and the setting and what this book was saying, but I think for me the plot just fell really flat. Like, I honestly almost DNF'd this book multiple times, and the only reason why I didn't DNF it is because this was my Patreon book club pick for the for January and February. So if like that wasn't the case, I probably would have DNF'd this book about halfway. And now I will say that I know a lot of people have read this book and loved it, so I don't want to discourage anyone from reading it because I think the setting and story of this book is super unique and one that I do think a lot of people are genuinely going to love and enjoy. It just wasn't for me. The plot just wasn't for me. I just really struggled with it for that reason. So unfortunately, not my favorite book of the year, but it might be yours. I will say that I did really enjoy a lot of the side characters in their stories. Like, that's where I was, I think, the most invested was especially a specific couple, those side characters. So that's where I was most invested, and I did really like the absolute ending, like the last couple pages. I was like, but I think like the book itself, I don't know, I feel like maybe if it had been edited down a bit, like it just felt like it was longer than it should have been, but also like maybe there was too much going on. There's just so many different elements to this book, and I was kind of like, I really wish that it had focused on something. I think that would have made it stronger ultimately. So I don't know. I liked what this book was doing. I liked what it was saying. Just the structure, the plot didn't work for me, and the writing. So yeah, not my favorite, unfortunately. Then I picked up a book that I think is gonna be one of my favorites of the year, and that is The First Sister by Lyndon A. Lewis, and I really enjoyed this one. This is a queer sci-fi. We follow three point of views. One of our point of views is a sister, the first sister, and so the sisters are basically these women who are forced into being mute, and they are used by men in the military to both like confess things to and also to have sex with. I don't like referring to them as comfort women because that's a very specific historical experience, and I don't like that the summary uses that term either. I would prefer if they stopped, but that's not used at all in the book, so I'm not going to hold that against the book. And then the next point of view is Leto Sol Lucius, who is a soldier who's very like sort of devoted and, you know, has a lot writing on him being a good soldier. And then the third point of view is Hero, and Hero is a defector and they are also non-binary. And Hero's perspective is told through recordings that they created for Leto. But yeah, I love this book. It's really short for like a sci-fi, and somehow despite its shortness I feel like it does such a good job of like having such a solid plot. Like nothing that happens in this book is unnecessary, everything is needed. So I loved that. I felt like it had really strong character development and just characters in general, and it also had such fantastic world building. Like I was totally sucked into this story and this world. Yeah, this book really has it all. I just had such a good time with it, so I definitely recommend checking this one out if you're interested in fantasy, I mean sci-fi. I think you'll enjoy it. I also think it's a really easy to get into sci-fi because like I definitely have not read a ton of sci-fi in my life, and I had no issues reading this one. It was just super easy to fall into and like understand everything. So yeah, I think this one is definitely one to pick up, and I really enjoyed it. Then I did a whole video in which I read a bunch of K-pop books, so if you want my in-depth thoughts on these books, check that out. But the first one I read is I'll Be the One by Lila Lee. In this book we follow a plus-size Korean American girl who tries out for a K-pop singing and dancing competition in LA, and I was nervous going into this one because I was scared it was going to be really kind of condescending and that it was going to really sugarcoat the realities of what it means to be plus-size in Korean culture, and especially in like the K-pop world. This book does not do that. I mean, it does it a little bit, like it's not as like intense as it would be, but like it also shows like the meanness and just what that experience is actually like, which I appreciated. And I thought this was a fun YA contemporary. Definitely had some like real emotional points in it. If you're interested in seeing someone who is talented go after their dreams, I think you'll like this one. This one is definitely not as like steeped into the K-pop world as the other two books I'm going to talk about. So if you want something that is more like in the K-pop world, I will recommend the other two books. So the first one is K-pop Confidential by Stephen Lee. This one was really fun. This is about a girl who sort of gets thrust into the K-pop world, not really by choice, but I really loved her character and I just loved her story. You really see her throughout the trainee process, and it shows a lot of the like negatives of the trainee process. And this one I guess is getting a sequel. I think all three of these are getting sequels maybe, but I don't know. I'm really excited for the sequel for this one because the way this ends, I was like, you cannot end this book here. But yeah, if you're interested in seeing what the trainee life is like in fiction, this is definitely a fun one to pick up. And then the last book is Shine by Jessica Jung. Jessica Jung was a member of Girls' Generation. Girls' Generation is one of the biggest K-pop groups of all time, and you definitely, that like adds this element of authenticity to this book, which I really enjoyed. And you kind of do get a little bit of tea about maybe why Jessica Jung left Girls' Generation. Who knows? We don't know. But maybe. But yeah, it was definitely really interesting to read because Jessica was actually part of that world. I will say that I don't think any of these are like the greatest books ever written, but I wasn't going into them looking for that. I just wanted to have like a fun time and read about, you know, someone in the K-pop world, like a story about someone in K-pop. And I wanted to read about that from a Korean perspective, and all three of these books did that, and I think did that really well. I had fun with each one. So honestly, it really just depends on like what kind of experience you want to have within your K-pop story. Then the next book I read is Legendborn by Tracy Deonn. This is a dark academia novel in which we follow Bree, whose mom has passed away before the start of this book, and she's struggling a lot with grief, and she's doing this like pre-college program at, I forget what college it is actually, but she's at a college, and she's doing this like early college program there. And while she's there, she gets sort of swept into the secret society of Arthurian, based in like Arthurian legend. And this one is such a solid, fantastic, great definitely recommend Dark Academia's story. I feel like Dark Academia has kind of been in some ways watered down to being like just an aesthetic or vibe, when like the reason why I've loved Dark Academia for so many years is because at its core it is a critique or criticism of academia, and I feel like without that it's just a book set at college, you know? And so this book does such a good job of critiquing that academic world and the racism within that academic world, and how so much of that racism is just kind of like forgotten, like just pushed to the past, and like how people just kind of pretend like it doesn't exist, even though it has a really big impact on like students today still. So I loved that about this book. I loved the magic in this book, the secret society elements. I loved Bree as a character and her story, and just the way that like the way that Tracy Deonn just like wrote her character just felt so real to me, especially as someone who has dealt with the grief of losing a parent. Like I really appreciated that grief was a key part of Bree's character, you know. It wasn't just something that was used as almost like a plot device to like move her forward. Like it had a really big impact on who she was and how she approached the world. And we saw like the way that she grew throughout the story, which I thought was so fantastically done. So yeah, I really enjoyed this one. Would definitely recommend it. I feel like this one has just been everywhere. People have been loving on it, so I probably don't need to convince you, but if you need convincing, this is definitely a great one to pick up in my opinion. Also, this has one of the best, like the romance in it isn't at the forefront of the story, but it is, I think, one of the best YA romances that I've read in a long time. Like I love the arc that it is taking. It's so good. So I would definitely recommend it for that too. So then I had a couple more books that I read because of TikTok. The first one is Kingdom of the Wicked by Carrie Maniscalco. I did not like this book at all. This is, I think, my most disappointing read of the year so far. It was just, the whole time I was reading it, I was like, this would be so cool if it was like written well, which I feel mean saying, but that is the truth. Yeah, I just did not like this book. And again, it's an interesting story. Like at the surface level, I was totally in. Like it's basically set in Italy. You follow a girl who sort of makes a deal with a prince of hell, and there's like 7 of them, so like the seven sins basically, and it's enemies to lovers, and I love enemies to lovers, but I just like, this is not the kind of enemies to lovers that I like. Like when I say I want enemies to lovers, I also want to believe that person is their enemy, you know. Like I want to see the progression of them going from enemies to like to lovers, and I want to like feel that progression. And in this, it was like instantly, you know, you know that they're gonna be antagonistic to each other, but like they're gonna fall in love. I'm like, whatever. And so I really didn't feel that in this book. And then I just felt like in general the story itself just fell really flat. Like I had a really hard time caring about what was happening in the plot, and I feel like I would have really loved the world, but I just like, I couldn't place it, you know. Like the whole time I was like, is this modern day? Is this the 1800s? I'm not really certain. It was really hard to like, just from the way that the story is written, to like pick up on that through context clues, in my opinion. So yeah, I don't know, I think I just wanted more like historical detail or just like world building detail that wasn't there, and just, you know, better character work, better plot work. None of it really worked for me. So yeah, this book was not my fave, and I've always wanted to read the Stalking Jack the Ripper series, but after this I feel like I'm gonna pass on that, so not my favorite. Then I read Song of Achilles, which I loved, and I lent out my copy, so I don't have it here to hold up for you guys, but wow, did I love this book. I will say that like there were a few parts in it that dragged for me, but despite that, it's a 5-star because it seared itself onto my heart. You know that I know that I love a book when I finish it and immediately go into Spotify to build a Spotify playlist for it. So yeah, I'll link that down below in case you want my Song of Achilles Spotify playlist. So I love this book. It's a retelling of the Iliad following Achilles, and it's about his romance with Patroclus. And it's just beautifully written, and devastating, and it's so good. I loved it so much. One of my new favorite books of all time. Another favorite book that I read recently is A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson, and this is one that I haven't seen anyone talk about, and I just want more people to read it because I feel like people would love this book, especially if you are a fan of Seanan McGuire's Every Heart a Doorway series. You'll love it. This is a retelling of Dracula, but from the perspective of one of his brides who is writing him letters, and it features queer polyamorous vampires. Love that. And the writing in this is just stunning. So lyrical, so romantic. It's just, oh, it's beautiful. Such a beautiful book. And even though this book is written very romantically, like the prose is what I would call romantic, this book is not a romance at all. If anything, it's very dark, and it definitely depicts really, really horrific things throughout it, but it does this with like really beautiful language, which I think just like adds to that sort of gothic element. But at its core, this book is definitely an exploration of what it means to be sort of deep in an abusive relationship. So definitely keep that in mind if that's not something you're comfortable reading about, but I loved this. I loved this a lot, so definitely a favorite. Then I don't really know how to talk about this one, but I read this book called All of This Is For You. It's a little book of kindness by Ruby Jones, and it's basically just pictures with a little bit of text, but it's literally just like a little book of kindness, and I flipped through it really quick one day and I felt warm and cozy. And that's really all this book is meant to do, I feel like. So I like this one as really just a lovely sort of quick read for the day. Definitely this would be a really great gift for someone, I feel like. So yeah, this is just a sweet little book. I don't have much else to say about it. And then lastly, I read Howl's Moving Castle. I read this as part of the Magical Girl Society book club, and I had such a fun time reading this. If you're unfamiliar, so this is the book that the film Howl's Moving Castle was based off of, and when I was reading this, I definitely the whole time was picturing it all in that sort of Ghibli art style. In some ways it felt like just getting like an extended cut of the film. You get so much more understanding of all the different characters and like different plot points that were left out of the film. So I really loved this, and I definitely want to pick up the rest of the series because I am so in love with Howl and Sophie and just all of these characters. So if you've read the rest of the series, I'd love to know your thoughts on that. But yeah, those are all of the books that I read recently. I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments. What books have you read recently that you loved or hated? But now I'm gonna dive into my reading goals. So I have my computer so that I can reference my Notion where I put all these goals. So my first goal was to build up daily reading habits, and I had 3 progress goals under that. The first one was to read every day for a week, for 30 minutes every day at some point in January. I accomplished that, but I didn't accomplish it the way that I wanted to. I really wanted to film that, but honestly I had a couple of rough days that week, so I didn't film that. So maybe I'll do that again, and try and do that sometime in the future. I did that with the goal of trying to make that like my everyday, but it definitely did not become my everyday. So maybe I have to make it a goal to do that for longer than a week. And then my second progress goal is to make reading part of my bedtime and nighttime, or bedtime and morning routine by the end of February. Did not do that. That is not part of my routine. I'm still on YouTube before I go to bed, but honestly, like, that's just where I'm at right now. And then lastly was to read 15 books by the end of March. I did accomplish that. I read 20 books by the end of March, so I'm very, very proud of myself. My second goal was to read more books that I own, so my progress goals for this were to add my library to Notion by January 15th. I did not accomplish this because I learned that I do not like I do not like Notion for tracking my reading. I tried it. I liked the thing that I made for it, but I did not like updating it. So I ended up making a Storygraph account. If you want to add me, my username is just Monica. I ended up making a Storygraph, and that's what I'm using now to track my actual like physically owned library. And then Goodreads I'm still using for like reading updates and like community stuff. So using both of those as of right now. But yeah, and Notion in general, I feel like I definitely at the beginning of the year got way too enthusiastic about trying to make it like aesthetic and trying to make like all these different lists, basically doing what I did with bullet journaling all those years ago when I was trying to be a bullet journaler. Yeah, just not for me. I'm not someone who will, you know, be able to like make a ton of lists and then update them throughout the year. That's just not a thing. I'm not a tracker kind of person. So yeah, I've had to sort of adjust how I use Notion again. Next goal was to limit my book purchases to 5 per month. I think I pretty much accomplished that. And then lastly was to unhaul books by end of March. I have done that kind of, like I went through all my books and I selected all the books I want to unhaul, and they're now all under here. I haven't unhauled them though because my local library is not accepting donations, so I'm waiting for that to change so that I can donate those books. And goal number 3 is to complete series that I've started, and I accomplished the 3 progress goals were to finish the 5th season Heartstopper and the Wicked Fox series, and I caught up with Heartstopper, so I read all of the published books in that graphic novel series. I did not finish the 5th season because I didn't own the 2nd book, so that was really just silly on my part to like put a series that I hadn't fully purchased yet. I did finally purchase the last 2 books in that series, so I'm hoping to read those soon. And that I do still want to read The Wicked Fox, like finish the 2nd book of that series, and also I'm going to add on to that the Shadow of the Fox series, because I have 1 book left in that series that I need to finish. So I'm hoping to accomplish that soon, this quarter. Oh, and then I also had the goals of like just doing sort of read with me live streams, and also doing more one-off book reviews and stuff on like TikTok or Instagram Reels. So I did create a BookTok account, so if you want to follow me on BookTok, my username is Unnie Reads. I'll also have that in the description box. And then I also have a fashion TikTok that I've had for a while, so you could follow either or both or neither. And I've been posting lots of bookish content on there, and I've been having a lot of fun. And then I have been doing some read with me, live read with me's here on my channel. I am kind of debating if I want to continue doing that here or if I want to move that to Twitch, because apparently the YouTube algorithm doesn't like live content and will like kill your channel if you do too much of it. So I am a little bit nervous about that. So trying to figure out how I want to proceed there. As for my goals this quarter, I tried to make them a bit more simple, because I think last quarter I did all those like progress goals and things, and I was like, you know what? I just don't think I'm the kind of person who's actually going to track like progress goals. So instead, I just tried to make like 3 simple goals that I want to accomplish over the next 3 months. And they are to read 20 books again, because I did it last quarter, so I want to do it again. Do a 24-hour readathon, because I haven't done one of those in I think years, and they're really fun, so I'd like to do that. And I also want to complete a series I already started. So I have options. I could do the 5th season, I could do Shadow of the Fox, or I could do Wicked Fox. Wait, what? What's it called? Wicked Fox. Yeah, it's called Wicked Fox. So, or I could do Wicked Fox. So those are my 3 options. I just need to complete one of those, and these goals will be met. So yeah, much simpler reading goals for me. I'm gonna just try that out and see how I like it, as opposed to doing those more in-depth goals that I did last quarter. But yeah, that is everything. Those are my goals, the books that I recently read. I'd love to hear from you all. Again, what books have you recently read? How are your reading goals going? Let me know in the comments, and I will talk to y'all next time. Bye!